All right, dudes, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Here with Wade and Matt. Let's do this. We've been working on this recording for a while now. Mm-hmm. Where do you guys live in Canada?
Well, I'm in Vancouver for a grand total of 2 more weeks, and I will be moving down to Venice Beach, California.
Oh,
just
you and all
the house today,
dude. Nice, good for you. You and all the other wellness people. I'm the only holdout that still lives in the Hollywood area.
You've transcended to the mountain where we have to come up to see you.
I have. This is like a Himalayan cave up here.
Yeah.
If we have time, I'll show you the Zen Den. That's my real man.
Oh, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that's where I have the biocharger and the sauna and the Juve and all the things.
I love it.
I spent a lot more time up there. So,
yeah, I'm Canadian, but I escaped the cold and the taxes and moved to Panama 15 years ago.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
You live in Panama?
Mm-hmm.
Word.
Yeah, I actually just celebrated my 15th year anniversary a couple days ago.
Expat vibes.
Mm-hmm.
And you got the hookup on the cultured stem cells down there too.
That's it.
Have you ever done it?
I haven't gone to see them yet. No. So
there's the guy, from what I understand. I forget his name.
It's the place. They do a lot of stuff there that legally they can't do in other countries.
Yeah.
So if you got serious medical issues, like I know they have heart protocol, stuff like that, it's probably the best place to go. If you're looking more for joints or IVs, then you have a lot more options.
Yeah. Cool. Good stuff. I didn't realize that. Well, I'm glad we caught you guys stateside here. And we're going to jump right in and stay super focused. So tell me how you guys get into digestion in the first place.
Yeah. Well, it's always trying to solve a problem. So I competed at the Mr. Universe contest, and at the time I was trying to adapt the meat eater's mentality in a bodybuilding performance diet to compete at the Mr. Universe on a plant-based diet without drugs. And that's a very tall order. And no one was doing this. This is back in 2003. So there was no plant-based performance guys or any of that stuff. It's starting to change now, and we were kind of figuring it out. And after the Mr. Universe contest, I gained 42 pounds of fat and water in 11 weeks. I literally, I was able to kind of do the performance protocol at the expense of my health. And Matt will kind of talk about how we've kind of reframed of what is the optimized or biologically optimized person. But I had an opportunity to meet a doctor, Michael O'Brien, and he was a phenomenal person. I mean, he was in his 70s, and he was just so vibrant. He had so much energy, and he could look right through. And I went to him. I said, I don't understand. I said, look, I've got Spartan discipline. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. I've went to what I call the cosmetic idea, which is really what bodybuilding is. It's creating the external cosmetic level of perfection. And I said, and I'm a physical wreck. What happened? And he said to me, Wade, you've learned to build the body from the outside in, but you haven't learned how to build the body from the inside out. And what you've been doing has wrecked your digestion. Most people, it's later on, but I just got there faster because I was pushing so hard. And I said, well, what do I need to do? And he says, you need to completely rebuild your digestive system. And in order to do that, I was going to have to take what I call therapeutic dosages of enzymes and probiotics and minerals and all these sort of different things. And I did it. And it transformed my life. It worked. And not only that, I was able to take that and expand upon it. And Matt and I mentored under him. And I remember we went to their lectures, and we were just like, we have to do this. This is kind of our dharma. And we got started in that and haven't looked back since 2004.
And one of the most useful frameworks that he gave us, which is, to us we're still using, is that the workers in the body are the enzymes and the probiotics. So all these materials, whether it's amino acids, fatty acids, glucose, vitamins, and minerals, they're the building blocks. And you just shared this metaphor. If you imagine you're building a home, you got the finest materials in the world, but there's nobody to put it together, nothing's happening. Enzymes do 25,000 different things in the body. So if you're not producing enough enzymes and you don't have enough of the right gut flora, then you're not able to disassemble and reassemble amino acids in the body. Because, if you think about, the 7,000 peptides that activate all these different functions in our bodies, these are just amino acids that your body is combining. But if you eating the best protein source in the world, if you can't break that down, it's actually becomes a toxin, which we can talk about later.
Oh, you know what's not on my list that I want to ask you guys? Let me just ask you right now because I don't have my pen to do it for later. Do you think that paying attention to food combining is legit?
You're the second guy to ask us that today.
Yeah,
Because I don't know if it's like a nocebo thing where I got that belief system in my subconscious, and then when I eat certain foods together, it wrecks my gut and I have heartburn and all these problems. But I know some people that can eat like, bacon and eggs and then drink a big orange juice on top of it in the morning, and they're rocking and feel great. If I mix any kind of sugar or fruit, if I eat that after I eat carbs or protein or fat, it wrecks me. And so I don't know if that's because I believe that, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And it's like my body's going, oh, we're just following what you believe to be true. Or if that is that a thing? Because different foods digest at different rates of speed, right? Like obviously if you have some ice cream, that's going to run through you, or a peach faster than a big old ribeye is. So what are your take on mixing, carbs, proteins, fats, sugars, et cetera, together?
Well, I've thought about this a lot, particularly because it's, you really get into diet and food, even, my background from the bodybuilding and nutrition. And if you look at nature combines proteins, fats, and carbohydrates in almost every single food that it makes in different ratios. The challenge that we're facing today is we set a definition of food which is very incomplete, and there was consequences to that en masse, because you have to understand it's not just about what's happening. And so I'm going to go macro first, and then we're going to go micro. The macro situation is starvation and calorie insufficiency was a major problem up until 60, 70 years ago in industrialized worlds. We went to monoculture production, and we went to massive food distribution. And the advantages of that, we solved the caloric and nutrient component of that. But our definition of food did not account for what was the protein content, what was the fatty acid content, what was the phytonutrient content, what was the enzyme content, what were the probiotics that were naturally occurring. That most of that stuff was washed out. And so what happens is your food that you're eating today, for most people, is nothing like any of our ancestors have eaten, outside of the last couple of generations. And so what happens, and then you add on to all the chemicalization and industrialization and civilization components that we're adding all these other elements that interfere the natural conversion pathways of converting your food into what I call electrons. I mean, if you're talking from an energy pathway, we're all living on electrons. And your ability to convert into energy units and into building blocks is going to determine how well you digest food. Now, if you have a compromised digestive system, let's say you have a compromised lipase pathway. That's lipase is the enzymatic pathway that breaks down fats. If you have that and you combine, say, fats with carbohydrates, chances are you're going to have a problem. You're going to be metabolizing the carbohydrates. You're not going to be metabolizing the fats. There's going to be interactions. It's not going to work right. If you have a dysbiosis in your bacteria culture, some foods are going to be inflammatory, some are not. And the more that you put in combination, the more likelihood that you're going to run into a problem. So this is the kind of situation that people are faced with. And generally what happens is people get into dietary strategies or pattern, and there's a benefit to reduction-based strategies, which most diets start there, whether they're moving to a cleansing diet or a raw food diet or a vegetarian diet, or maybe they're going to a keto diet, depending on their genetics and epigenetics and which one's going to do better. The reality is people mistake the change or the elimination with the benefit. There's a benefit from reducing the inflammatory components or the compromised things, but you can only reduce yourself to a certain amount. It's like you can't budget your way to become a billionaire. Getting budgetary control is a great idea, but at some point you got to spend time, energy in expanding your capacity. And when you're talking about digestion, I would say that just look at the facts. 12% of the society today, or 12% of the emergency hospital visits right now are gastrointestinal related illnesses. 25% of the population is on prescription medications for digestive related conditions, and a third of Americans today are suffering from some form of digestive distress on any given day of the week. So what we're talking about here is the collective food strategy that we've embraced in the westernized world has benefits, but also severe consequences, which are passed on generationally. And the reality is food combining makes sense in a compromise situation for some people for some time, but ultimately we're into optimization. We're into how do you create dietary flexibility that you could be successful on virtually any kind of diet, that you can have the tools to deal with any kind of meal, and then that you, through testing and optimization, that you're able to figure out the components that are going to allow you to just rock and convert anything into the energy units and building blocks that you want. That's the ultimate goal, flexibility. So that's what we're all about, and I know it's kind of a roundabout answer, but I think sometimes you can get too narrow and not understand the big picture, because if you don't see the big picture, you're just going through a maze and you continue to get lost on strategies or philosophies that are I would say, that are limiting as opposed to expanding.
Here's the great news, though. First of all, eating a lot of... I'll talk about the tests that we're really big fans of to really optimize your diet, whatever type of diet you're doing. But you can hack the digestive process using enzymes, hydrochloric acids, and probiotics. So even if you want to eat whatever you want to eat, those will allow you to not have digestive distress. So I do like a massive calorie days every Sunday. I'm keto the rest of the week. And I eat about 6,000 calories, which is a lot of food. And I eat pretty much whatever I want. It's not a clean day. And I have very close to zero digestive distress because I use those tools, which we can get more into later. But what we're big fans of on the optimization side, one is using biome data to look at the strains you have, and then looking at the superfood list and the foods to avoid list and shifting more of your diet to that. So to give you an example, I do usually a super salad once a week, and it's all foods that are in the superfood category. So arugula, watercress, salmon, blueberries.
From your Viome.
From my
test.
Viome.
And by the way, guys, what he's talking about is a particular gut test. We had Naveen Jain on the show a while ago, and you can get the Viome test at lukestorey.com/store. Little plug there, but it's very useful because it's like, it gives you the foods that are optimized for your particular gut and which aren't, which was interesting because, sorry to divert you, but I just want to give this insight. When I got the test, I was expecting like, oh shit, what if I can't have burgers anymore, or whatever. I didn't want to give up. And it's like my Viome results were exactly what I like to eat anyway. Yeah. There were very few things on there that I wanted to eat and shouldn't, and vice versa. There weren't things that were recommended that I hate. It was so interesting. It's like my body kind of knows.
I had the similar result, like chicken. It's never sat well with me, and it was like, don't eat chicken. Arugula and watercress were things that, like, I always preferred that over normal lettuce and romaine and whatever. Those were my superfoods. But what's amazing, when I eat that super salad, which is like literally like 2 pounds, Wade and I are big fans of big ass salads. My body just incinerates it. Like almost nothing comes out, and my weight will actually drop. So that's because the probiotics, going back to the workers, when it hits that part of the intestine, they just start literally feasting. So that's one of our favorite tools. Doing a food sensitivity test like Cyrex, and obviously eliminating foods that stress your body is another great idea. And the other one is nutrigenomics, because that's a big deal. For an example, like coconut oil, which is very popular on keto and other diets. I got my triglycerides tested. I was over 200, which is pretty high. And then I was doing muscle testing and figured out, okay, it's the coconut oil. Pretty much eliminated out of my diet. And then I went down to 95. So for me, which makes sense, I'm from Canada. I've got European genetics. Like, coconuts have not been part of the culture, versus I live in Panama now, and my wife, she was born eating coconuts, and it doesn't have an issue. So there are genes that allow us to eat more saturated fats or eat plants and convert the plants into usable omega-3s, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So nutrigenomics is another tool to really optimize your diet.
And is that a test that someone can order? Do you need to go through a functional medicine doctor and all that?
I mean, I have no doubt that in the next couple of years, these tests will be commercially available. But yeah, we have someone that we work with that probably the best we're aware of, as far as, she's incredibly smart and spent maybe thousands of hours at this point studying all the mutations. And it's not easy to do, even if you know your stuff. So that's what we use.
Oh, cool. Awesome. So in essence, to the food combining thing, it's like if your digestion is optimized and you're shredding food like your body is meant to, it's not that big of a deal. So 15,000 years ago, if I, dig up some wild leeks and go smoke a raccoon or something, eat them together with some wild rice, not a problem. But if you've been eating glyphosate and
exactly,
Fruit Loops your whole childhood and all that, then you're not going to, I think that's, it's interesting because when I ignore the food combining rules that I kind of have in place for myself, if I chug a bunch of enzymes and HCl, like the ones you guys make, then it's pretty good.
Yeah.
But I need that boost because my body's like, fuck you, this is too much at once.
Well, I find it's ironic too. If you go back to Hippocrates, the father of medicine, he said all disease begins in the gut.
Right.
2,500 years. How he knew that information, I'm not sure.
Well, exactly. It was probably looking at the people around him and probably noticing some gut challenges back then.
Yeah.
Well, that's, it's interesting also the let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food thing. But as I've heard you guys say on other interviews that I've heard you on, it's not about the food you're eating, it's what you actually assimilate. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so confusing to so many people like me that at different times your diet is super clean, whether you're vegan, paleo, carnivore, whatever, like you're eating really good food in whatever category suits you and you're still sick. It's like, what the hell is going on? And I think that's why I really wanted to do a show, just like zero in on this digestion issue.
Well, one of the things that will really, it can literally kill you is undigested proteins. That's an allergic reaction. Is a protein that your body cannot break down and your immune system says, whoa, that's a threat. And, like I said, it can kill you. So, we're obviously amino acids, what creates our neurotransmitters, our peptides, our muscle, is what repairs your body. Of course, fatty acids are really important as well. These are really the two main nutrients that builds our body as far as the inside out. Of course, carbs we use for energy if you're a carbivore like Wade is. But unless that nutrient is broken down and passes through the intestinal tract, like it's not used. It just ends up in the toilet, or again, worse, creates inflammation and other problems. So you got to break your food down.
What's the deal with the different types of enzymes? And I know we could have like a whole 5-hour show just on enzymes and the 25,000 things that they do in your body and all of that. But at different times I've explored all kinds of different companies that make enzymes. And at one point, I got really into these systemic enzymes, particularly this brand called Wobenzyme, that are like bovine pancreas and just all these pretty potent animal derivatives. I think they're originally from Germany. And I started using that for pain in my body and just inflammation. So I'd take like 30 or 40 of those tablets with just a huge glass of water. And all of a sudden, no back pain. I'm more flexible. My joints, tendons, ligaments are real happy. And then I found also I could take them on top of a really heavy meal and it helped with digestion. And then at one point I got into serapeptase because I'm always working on joint mobility and things like that. And I would do serapeptase rectal infusions where you take like basically
is that for tight ass?
A bunch of serapeptase empty out like 20 serapeptase capsules into a quarter of a glass of water and then take basically what's like a giant syringe or turkey baster kind of thing and up the old and then that would help with pain and stuff. So enzymes seem to have like this anti-inflammatory effect, but also help you with digestion. So I don't know, kind of unpack all the different types of enzymes and what they do if you can.
Well, and back to all the ones you mentioned, they're mostly proteolytic enzymes. And so the main three categories is amylases, which breaks down carbs into glycogen, the lipases, which we looked at some of your interesting gut results, which we can talk about because it seems you have some lipase challenges. And those break down the fats into fatty acids. And then there's the proteases, which breaks the protein down to aminos. And almost all the enzymes you just mentioned are proteolytic. So it goes back to what I was saying that, the inflammation could be caused by undigested proteins that are floating around. And the serapeptase actually breaks down fibrin, which is scar tissue, which helps with the mobility, which, we're all building scar tissue to different degrees as we get older. And there's literally thousands and thousands of enzymes that do very specific things. If you can't break down lactose, for example, there's lactase and so on and so forth. If you can't break down cellulose, there's cellulase. So what we did...
That's interesting, because I think, on the plant-based diet, I did not do well because I was eating tons of cellulose and legumes and things like that.
Yeah.
And it just wrecked me because I couldn't I couldn't
need,
digest it.
You need cellulose or hemicellulase.
Oh, okay.
These type of products that are designed to break down the fiber, which typically would have been present in the foods if we had got them in a natural, normal state. That goes back to the whole food production, food distribution model. Got it. So
which is essentially why we need products like yours and others to kind of prop ourselves up. Like I always go back to pre-agriculture. Most of the shit that we're doing in biohacking and kind of health enthusiasts wouldn't have been necessary because you used to be living off the land and you're golden for the most part, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, back to, you were on a good track there with the various enzymes and what they do.
So what we did with Masszymes, there's 17 different enzymes, but because we're Wade's a natural bodybuilding champion and I've been into building muscle for a long time. We wanted to focus on the protease. Again, because we know the power of amino acids from a muscle building perspective, from a health perspective, and even from an anti-aging perspective. I don't know if you've read Longevity Code. It came out not that long ago. And the theories that what's killing centenarians and supercentenarians is actually protein accumulation in the cells, and the cells just stop working. So in our opinion, and going back to fasting, one of the things that will accelerate the effects and the benefits of fasting is taking a massive amount of proteolytic enzymes, which, you call them systemic. Any proteolytic enzyme you take in without food will go in and start cleaning house. So,
and I just want to interrupt there so I understand this. So something like serapeptase, whether you're being a normal person and swallowing it or being a weirdo and putting it up your wazoo, how does that actually, when we say it eats scar tissue, because that's why I was taking it, does it get in your blood and then, so your blood transports it into all of the different, into your muscles and anywhere, I guess, like under your fascia, and starts just knowingly, it just knows how to kind of get in and work on stuff?
I really want to talk about, I'm glad you brought this up, because I think a lot of people don't actually understand what an enzyme is.
Yeah, me either.
Okay. And it's enzymes are the difference between the living and the dead. The difference between stones, plants, and people. Enzymes are catalysts, which means they accelerate processes inside of your body. Also, there's a foundational principle in orthomolecular nutrition, the treatment of disease or disorder through nutrition.
Linus Pauling.
Dr. Hoffer, Abram, Dr. Abram, all those guys.
And our boy Hawkins.
Yeah, have you ever read the paper? I could never find it.
Yeah, no, actually got the book.
Are you the Hawkins?
I got the actual book with the stuff and how they were figuring this stuff out in the 70s. It was incredible. The collective intellectual horsepower of those guys is just really, really far out. I got that book. It was obscure to get. You might be able to find one on Amazon used books somewhere, some dusty place, and some, somebody found in a university. But going back to the enzyme situation is Dr. Edward Howell, and I recommend everybody just go get the book, Enzyme Nutrition or Food Enzymes for Health and Longevity, if you want a little bit more of the studies and research and stuff.
Great book.
He demonstrated that the life expectancy, the total life of any organisms was directly and inversely correlated with the amount of enzymes present in that organism. So take a person that's two people, let's say you had two twins, and one person lives a really healthy lifestyle, and another person starts doing excessive drug use. Well, how does your body get rid of these drugs? It starts burning up its enzymatic use. And you'll take those two people, which will age completely differently because of the exhaust rate of the enzymatic potential of the drug user versus the person who is preserving their enzymes through a healthier lifestyle. And I do believe this is one of the reasons why fasting is so effective. And the one thing they seem to be correlated with people who live a long time is they eat less than regular people. And digestion takes a massive amount of these enzymes in order to break down, because we're the only species on the planet that does not eat their food in a raw food state for the most period of time. Tiger knocks down a zebra, eats the enzymes, eats the entrails where the enzymes and the probiotics are, then it eats the carcass. A horse or a cow will go out and find the most, like, try and get all the sprouts, which is the most enzymatically rich stuff. A bear will eat blueberries raw, it'll eat salmon raw. Now, and this goes back to the definition of food.
Oh, interesting. So
right?
enzymes are present in animal foods in the organs.
Right. And as well as when you pull out a carrot, it would not just have the enzymes present in it in its richest form. It also have the bacteria on it. It's just, we take the carrot out of my mom's garden and we dust it off and we eat it.
And for some reason it tastes better. I was just at my dad plants a huge, like almost 1 acre garden, and I don't know, there's actually a flavor almost. Like my brain is saying, wow, correct, this is a better carrot than even when they clean it and put it in the fridge and I eat the same carrot when it's clean. I don't know, the probiotics are telling my brain, wow, this is really good for you.
Well, once that carrot dies, okay, its enzymatic potential starts to diminish. If a seal is being eaten by a killer whale, there's an enzyme present in all living beings called cathispin that's released once that seal dies and it starts to break down. Now, the whale gets all the enzyme potential of that seal, just like the horse gets the enzyme potential. So there's a replenishment, and that's part of the definition of food. We've stripped away the enzymes because what happens when you radiate food, it has a longer shelf life. And shelf life is important for the food distribution component. When you add mineral deficient soils and you add nitrogen fertilizers and things like chemical fertilizers, you grow food that diminishes the protein content because the protein is now being converted into enzymes in order to sustain that particular species of food. And over time, in 1900, U.S. Congress had wheat that was, 90% protein, and now it's less than 7%. In fact, other countries oftentimes will refuse American wheat products because of the nutrient is not the same quality as if you get food. And everybody's gone to Italy and eaten all this pasta and said, I don't have the same thing as I have when I'm here. And that's just largely because we have the most sophisticated food production and distribution component, but the definition of what food is or what quality food is so 1950s that we've got to upgrade. And if you're into optimizing your health, if you're into optimizing your diet, if you're into anti-aging and high performance and aesthetics, which we're all kind of into, you have to recognize is that you need to redefine what food is, and enzymes need to be a critical component of that, because your potential, I went on a raw food diet and I saw all these raw foodies who would get better from restriction eating, but they weren't able to rebuild their enzymatic pool. And any enzyme, and going back to orthomolecular, because I'm kind of circling around here, but when you take high dosages of vitamin C at a certain point, you'll get a runs. If you take high doses of magnesium, you get the runs. And as biohackers, you go to that dosage and then you titrate down. I always call it the bucket theory. You have a burn rate in the bucket, but if you're only running a small bucket, then you're running out. But you want to fill the bucket up, and then you only have to add as much as you're burning. And if you burn more, you add more, and if you burn less, you need less. And so this whole enzyme thing is so powerful and so transformative for people when they understand of optimizing their diet, because that is literally the catalyst that is going to allow you to convert it. And then inside the body, if you don't use the enzymes for digestion, guess what? You don't get the runs. I've taken up to 1,000 capsules a day to see if I could break the GI barrier, and never did. And the enzymes are actually being absorbed and then transported into being systemic enzymes. I'll give you a small story, and we'll turn it over to Matt. So
if you take a larger load or dose of enzymes than is needed to digest the food, then those inherently just the extra goes into the other anti-inflammatory,
Correct.
the chewing up of scar tissue, all this kind of stuff.
Correct. And
the proteases.
Yeah,
the protease.
Yeah,
okay.
The protease. So I'll give you
it.
an example. I had a friend of mine. She had a very thick scar. She had a spider bite that created necrosis and started eating her skin. It was very terrible. And she ended up with this giant scar. It was about 3 inches long and probably a half-inch thick. And she was someone that did silks and all that acrobatic stuff. And it had gotten so bad that she wasn't able to get shoulder rotation. And so normally people would take something like serapeptase, which is a great product and stuff. And I said, this is an interesting experiment. Let's start giving you masszymes on an empty stomach. So we'd give her 5 enzymes, and within 15 minutes, the scar would get red and start to itch. And I'm like, this is fascinating. So we did this 2 times a day over the period of 9 months, and she was taking digestive enzymes as well. But particularly when we were taking on an empty stomach, we'd see this response. Now, obviously, she was very responsive. And in 9 months, the scar completely went flat. The coloration returned to the normalness of her skin so much that her 3-year-old daughter, she was holding her 3-year-old daughter, and her 3-year-old daughter goes, "Mommy, your scar's gone." And that was proof in the real world that I got to watch of the effects of the high-quality proteolytic enzymes, which are generally used for digestion, be converted into a systemic enzyme, therefore providing benefits outside of that. And of course, now the research shows about recovery factors and the healing of contusions and the acceleration of healing when people are supplementing with high-quality cultured enzymes. And so there's different types of enzymes.
Yeah.
Plant-based enzymes, animal-based enzymes, food-based enzymes, and then there's cultured enzymes. And cultured enzymes are going to be anywhere from 100 to 1,000 times more potent than a regular enzyme. And that's why there's such a disparity between, you'll go to Whole Foods and you'll see one set of enzymes that's $10 and another one that's 100. And it says amylase, protease, and lipase. Well, what's the difference? And it's because a lot of companies are taking advantage that the consumer is not sophisticated to understand what is a quality product that's going to get the job done, because there's nothing more expensive than a product that doesn't work. And that's why I think some people said, "I tried enzyme and didn't feel anything." Well, what enzyme did you try? How did you use it? And what's your current goals? It's always a determining factor.
If that type of enzyme that we were just talking about is breaking down proteins and then allowing you to extract amino acids from the protein, which is kind of the whole point of eating protein, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
how do enzymes play into minerals? I find it fascinating how, we have a plant in the room, which doesn't get as much sun. I'm sorry, plant. You're going to have to live off the blue light of the studio light. But you have your microbiome in the soil, right? And then the microbiome, this is my kind of Flintstonian understanding of it. The microbiome is eating rocks, which are minerals, right? And it's making it bioavailable to the plant. And then the plant has this enzymatic process that makes those minerals or electrolytes, kind of units of energy, I guess you could say, in a crude way. And please absolutely correct me if I'm wrong on any point of this. And then we either eat that plant, and then there's enzymes in there to help us assimilate that energy and those minerals, or an animal eats that, and then we eat that animal. Mm-hmm. But we're kind of like, we're getting the photonic energy from the sun, right? The electrons from the sun that are going into the plant or the animal in whatever order, and then we're getting the rocks or minerals and another form of energy coming from the soil. How do enzymes play into the mineral part of it, and did I get that process right at all?
You want to start?
Yeah. Here's the channel. You need enzymes to get your protein to get your minerals to get your vitamins.
Oh shit.
That's the pathway.
That's way more confusing than I thought.
so
my oversimplification of the process.
No, you're on track with that about the process, because essentially the plant is digesting essential elements for us through humic and fulvic acid is the mechanism that it's breaking that stuff down. And that's why that's such a popular supplement for people who are in the biohacking community that want to optimize.
This is why my body likes Shilajit so
Correct.
I put it in my coffee every day. I love that stuff.
100%.
So, and the minerals are involved in a lot of enzymatic processes.
Mm-hmm.
So magnesium,
right?
And I mean, all of them to different degrees are involved, including the trace minerals, which we're big fans of. So, it is part of the whole of the 25,000 enzymatic processes and reactions that are happening as we're speaking. From thinking to blinking to moving my arms. There's minerals that are part of that.
Interesting. Okay. I'm loving this. This is such good stuff. Something that I recently learned from John Gray, who most people learn about how to have a good relationship from John Gray, and he's great at that.
He's one of us, right? He's a biohacker.
Yeah, he is, and he's really into targeted supplementation. And I was just spent some time with him, just hanging out up in Marin recently, and he was like, "Dude, I discovered like the holy grail of protein assimilation." And he said, "What you do," and I think he makes a product that's like some kind of whey protein or something that has enzymes in it. Mm-hmm. But I just kind of hacked it, and I use your enzymes where you make like I don't even know how many grams of goddamn protein, bone broth protein, collagen, gelatin, whatever. I have them all. So I'll take that, 6 egg yolks, and then I'll take a bunch of your enzymes and blend it up in there, empty the capsules out, and then put it in the refrigerator for like an hour. Am I on the right track here with like pre-digesting kind of?
100%.
I pictured it like a bird chewing up the food and then regurgitating into the little chick's mouth, making it easy to
It's one of my favorite hacks, and especially for if you're working out. Because, when you're working out, as soon as you lift, and actually, like as soon as you finish, your body wants to start repairing the muscle. We know that a lot of the repair happens the 48, 72 hours after that, but it's kind of an instant response. And there is research that's shown that you can get more gains if you're getting amino acids in real time. And that's, we all know that BCAA is our popular supplement. But the hack is exactly what you just said, except I wouldn't put it in the fridge because,
shit.
The speed of the enzymatic process is directly correlated to temperature. And that's why when you get sick, your body's increasing the temperature of your body. And for each degree, it doubles the enzymatic activity. So as your body gets sick, you're like, okay, let's increase enzymatic activity to try to heal. And that's why your temperature goes up. So if you pull it out of the fridge, like within usually 30 minutes, you'll taste the change go from protein to amino acids, which is a very different flavor. And
it does not. My little formula does not taste great, so I don't recommend it for anyone that's like wanting a nice vanilla, kind of. It also turns it very watery.
Yeah,
it's just like
it'll get viscous.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It'll be just like a brown. It looks like a stout.
Yeah,
looks like a pint of stout after I'm done with it. Where it was the super creamy, like thick milkshake kind of consistency when I first blend it. Yeah,
you see all these little bubbles and chemical reactions. Basically,
it's interesting.
But Wade, why don't you share the experiment we did in Panama using that concoction?
Yeah, so we wanted to. Matt and I will cook up a theory. And we're like, all right, well, let's go test it, And sometimes it works, and sometimes it's a disaster. But we always learn. And so we just said, well, what's a workout that we couldn't possibly do? Can we accelerate recovery rate off? And we was like, well, doing a 300-set workout with every set to failure is kind of crazy. The average workout would maybe be anywhere between 15 to on the low end to maybe
30 in a big day.
30 in a big day. You know what I mean?
Mine's like 8. I use
that's what I
use
mean,
the
right?
X3 bar. I use like the thickest band I can, and it's like depending on the movement, which there's only 5 or 6 movements, I'll get to like 8 or 10, and I'm smoked.
So we were like, okay, this is verifiable. We're going to be in a lot of pain if we try and do this, if we can complete it. So we went at it, and what we did is we concocted up our protein shakes, blended up the masszymes, and some P3OM actually with it as well, and then went to the gym, and we sipped these drinks while we went through this insane workout. And I remember an hour and a half in, we're looking at each other and like, this doesn't feel too bad, right? Yeah. We get like 2.5 hours, and it's like, hey, we still feel pretty good. And we got to 3 hours, and it's like, okay, we get it. We got our 300 sets. It's pretty awesome. And it was just relentless. And what was interesting is we like, okay, well, now we did that. We might not be able to walk tomorrow, right? Like we felt we're going to be in a whole world of hurt. And I remember waking up the next day, and I wasn't sore. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, did something happen? Is like the soreness coming tomorrow is like the boogeyman or whatever? But
we call that creeper soreness.
Yeah, and there was a fellow by the name of, I think it was Dr. Di Pasquale that said that he used to use specific amino acids before the workout, during the workout, and after the workout, because he wanted to create certain repair pathways. And he was the guy that kind of said, you start repairing instantly. Mm-hmm. From that workout, and if you can provide those nutrients concordant to working out, that would work. Now, just sipping a protein shake without those probably wouldn't work that well, because now you're going to suck on your own enzymatic reserves. You need the external enzymes in order to get the lift.
Well, you just answered my next question, which would be like, because I'll also put extra amino acids in there too, just because why not?
Why not?
But I never know, like, should I drink that before I go lift or during, after?
Intro workout. You can start before and keep sipping throughout, so that, again, you don't want to overload the stomach because you don't have that much blood flow there, and it's just going in. So you want to kind of time it as you're sipping through, and by almost the end of it, you've drank your concoction. So it's a great hack. It really works well.
That's cool. I love that. Well, John Gray, man,
here's another hack too for those of you that might only have access to cheap cuts of meat. You can use masszymes and pre-digests the steak. So you take your steak, you put the capsule on it, and
break it open. Break the capsule.
Break the capsule open. Yeah, put the cap on it, won't work. Put the powder, blend it. Just spread it, and wait. Depending how much pre-digestion you want, an hour to 2 hours, and you'll actually see it'll start to dissolve the meat. But it's a great hack if you want to make cheap cuts of meat be more tender.
Oh, no way. Mm-hmm. Does it make them, the amino acids or the proteins any more bioavailable? Like once you cook it, is it easier to digest, or is it just a trick to make it not so tough?
It's more of a trick to make it tender.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Interesting. Wow,
I mean,
that's cool.
and some people that are cooks, they'll use pineapple, which has bromelain, to do the same trick, or papaya. So it's just science.
And what causes heartburn, guys? Because when as we were talking, we always have these deeper, more private conversations before the mics are on, but it's no secret that I did experiment a bit with opiates back in my former life. And when I did that, my digestion just stopped after a few years of those shenanigans. And I don't know that it's ever come back totally online as it would in prior to that. And one thing I suffered from a long time was heartburn. And over the years, as I've optimized, it's gotten better and better, but I think many people are still very confused about the different, I'm sure there's not one cause, but the many causes of it and what you can do about it. So break down heartburn.
Gas. So what happens is if you don't have enough hydrochloric acid, stomach acid, or bile, the gas builds up and pushes the valve, and then the fluids come up and burns. So it's kind of the opposite of, it sounds counterintuitive. Hey, I'm not making enough acid. That's why I've got acid heartburn. But basically, it's the gas that's pushing the valve, and then the liquid comes up. So Wade, you can cover the 5 stages of digestion, because it's such a great framework to understand each part of it.
Oh, cool. Let's do that.
Yeah. Okay. So remember that it's a single canal from your mouth to your anus. And whatever dietary program that you're following, people assume that if they eat something, it's going to go into your body. But you only get what you can digest, absorb, and utilize. And if you don't do that, and as I gave you the statistics earlier, people are compromised. So the first area of digestion is taste, touch, sense, smell the food. That actually starts to prepare. Your body goes into a digestive response inside the body. And
this is the Pavlov's dog.
Yeah, absolutely. The dog, they ring the bell and the dogs salivate. And if you look at Ayurvedic philosophy, they were very into touching and tasting their food as a sensory experience. And what's interesting is, if you look here in America, almost the most popular foods are finger foods. Pizza, burgers, fries. People eat with their fingers and their hands, which is kind of fascinating, because I do believe they're setting up their nervous system, and they're preparing themselves to absorb the food. And it's part of the joy of that is it's a much more richer sensory experience. So that's the first component.
Dude, you just I know you have this down, so I'm going to do this, but you just reminded me of being in India, and I had to learn the culture there. And oftentimes in the more rural areas, people eat with their hands, but you also you use, I forget if it's the left or right hand you use to clean yourself up after you you go to the bathroom.
That's why they do the namaste, right?
Yeah. So it's, you got to be careful which hand you're eating with. But I thought that was so fascinating when I went to India. I was like, wow, what are these people, Cretans? But it's just culturally in the more rural areas, people are just sitting there scooping up their food without utensils. Very interesting practice. So carry on to stage 2.
Yeah. So then the food, as you masticate it, which is a fancy name for chewing, the food goes down the esophagus and into what's called the upper cardiac portion of the stomach. Now, a lot of people believe that there's a big bowl of acid sitting there waiting to break down your foods. No, that doesn't happen. 30 to 60 minutes before the hydrochloric acid comes in. Now, in that time frame, that 36 minutes, the enzymes naturally present in the food are going to start activating in the high temperature in that environment. And if they're not present, it doesn't happen, and certain key amino acids don't get cleaved and ended up as undigested proteins in your intestinal tract, because that critical stage is important. When the next phase is the hydrochloric acid starts to come in. And this is where the magic starts to happen. Hydrochloric acids, it's first and foremost is there to disinfect against pathogens, parasites, bacteria, viruses, things like that. That high acidic environment is designed to kill. It's a big part of our immune system. Average 40-year-old, less than 30% of the hydrochloric acid production. It's why a lot of people say, hey, I used to be able to eat pizza and beer when I'm 20, now I'm 40 and I have pizza and beer and I'm like, oh, I have one piece and I'm bloated, I feel like crap for 2 days. That's oftentimes hydrochloric acid issue.
Yeah, and
or they're getting sick all the time.
Another friend of mine who's also in recovery, he's 35, he can, I don't think he's producing any stomach acid. Like, he just gets crazy heartburn unless he's taking hydrochloric acid. So, yeah, it depends. Obviously, the lifestyle, they can just compromise some of our systems sometimes. So I'm not surprised by what you were sharing.
Yeah. So as the hydrochloric acid starts to come in, the second thing is it starts changing the pH of that mixture. And why that's so important is because different proteases will start to cleave and break from proteins into amino acids at different pH levels. And so the big three in proteases is 6.0, 4.5, and 3.0, which is a correlation to a band that they work with. So the 3.0 would go down to about just about 1.5, and the 6 would go up to about 8 in regards to its ability. And that's a logarithmic scale. So it's, hydrochloric acid is extremely acidic, and your body needs it to break these things down and to kill these pathogens. So that mixture is going to work and start mixing around, and when it's kind of in its optimal state, it's going to transit out of the intestinal tract. And this is where, if someone has mineral deficiencies, where they'll run into trouble because they don't have the bicarbonate buffers, which is a fancy name for alkaline minerals that's going to buffer that acid coming out before it goes in the intestinal tract. If you don't have that, what happens is you start getting burn holes in your intestines, and that's where you get the ulcers, colitis ulcers, and duodenal ulcers, and all these sort of things, because something's disrupted in that system.
Do you think, on that note, supplementing with bicarbonate minerals or electrolytes is helpful generally? I'm a big fan of this magnesium bicarbonate. I put it in most of my water. It wasn't in y'all's water, but usually I'll kind of dilute a bit in my drinking water.
We're major fans of supplementing with all of the minerals, particularly trace minerals as well. Magnesium is a great alkaline. I think everybody needs to be on massive amounts of magnesium. It's probably I call it the master mineral.
Do you guys have a brand of trace minerals that you like that you can actually assimilate? Which I know is
Primergen V, Primergen M, which is made by us.
Oh, you guys do that?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, shit, man. I'm behind the times. I'm rocking.
I'll send you something.
Oh, great. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, and they're in the liquid fulvic humic acid base. And you do get a big lift. I mean, you can put that in your coffees, your teas. And
is that a new product you guys
That's actually
added?
one of our oldest.
Really?
Yeah,
I don't know how I missed that, because I ordered a bunch of stuff off your site, and I thought I got one of everything, or more than one. Interesting. But is it not true, and hold your thought on the 5 stages, because I want to wrap that up, but is it not true that most mineral supplements that we get aren't actually digestible? They're not bioavailable to us. They're
the
still
average
in like
pill. It's like 5% is the estimate.
Right, because it's like ground up rocks, basically.
Compressed grounded rocks that are up in the sewer.
We actually wrote about that 15 years ago when we were producing our bodybuilding, because we were kind of like some of the original biohackers as bodybuilders. And we were talking about fulvic acid and minerals and enzymes and probiotics and mind machines and electrocurrent therapy and hot and cold submission. We were kind of in that conversation for a long time. Going back to that, I do suggest that people can go and get a SpectraCell test. I think it's the best test for looking at micronutrients and mineral deficiencies, because if you took the 3 of us, each one of us would have a kind of a unique mineral deficiency, vitamin deficiency, or our ability to absorb that. So, for example, let's say the 3 of us were taking 20 milligrams of zinc. Well, our ability to absorb those 20 milligrams of zinc is probably going to be quite a bit different. So you might need 40, he might need 20, I might need 80 to get the amount that's going to help our bodies function based on methylation, epigenetics, and these type of things. So you can go really deep. Go ahead.
Yeah, and well, you started what I wanted to say, which is the epigenetics or genetics. Even if we were back to like the golden times of, you had the perfect garden in your house, there's still mutations to deal with, like genetic mutations that, for an example, there's the motherfucker gene, which is very, like 50%, I think, North Americans have MTHFR. And what that means is, there's a lot of things you just don't methylate. So what Wade is saying is that if you don't look at that data, it's easy to have nutrition deficiencies that even if you are eating the food, it can still be problematic. So it's just another piece of the puzzle. That's why we're so big on just nutrigenomics.
Cool. Awesome.
Keep rolling on the stages.
Right. So then,
yeah, I'm into this.
Yeah. So
I think a lot of us don't realize, we think of our insides and our GI tract as like being part of inside us, but it's really outside of you.
Correct. It's a single canal all the way down.
Garden hose.
It's like a pipe.
You have like a garden hose that runs through your body, and then it's permeable. Hopefully not more than you want it to be, and then your different organs are able to extract things out of that if these processes are working optimally.
Correct. So now we buffered that acid, and the food chyme now moves into the intestinal tract. And at that point, that's when your microbiome, the various probiotics inside your body, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So it's 10% good, 10% bad, and 80% opportunist. That's why oftentimes when people travel, they go to some place, they're subjected to new bacteria or new food or whatever, and it disrupts the microbiome, and they get sick, or they get food poisoning, or they run into some kind of problem. Go ahead.
Which we are undefeated against food poisoning, as far as we know.
With your probiotic.
The P3OM, it's never lost. I mean, I've had food poisoning me 4 times the last 6-7 years. My wife. One guy, which we don't advise you do this, gave himself food poisoning to test. It's
just like, don't do this.
That's like Wim Hof, taking the.
It's exactly like that. Yeah, biohackers are pretty crazy. So
himself
caveat mTOR. We guys, we're not recommending going out and trying to kill yourself.
But the thing is, it happens. I mean, if you go out and you eat, you travel, and sometimes it's even just obviously in the water, there's new strains of bacteria that exist, whether it's the Bali or India or Mexico, that can be present in the water that creates massive disruption in your intestinal tract, and then you got diarrhea, you're vomiting. But P3OM solves that every single time within usually 30 minutes. Because usually when you have food poisoning, it's a 24 to 48-hour ordeal, which is typically not pleasant. So anyway,
you just made me think of like every intern I've ever hired in my whole life. Like we used to joke with other business that I own in fashion, and we would hire interns or just assistants and whatnot, and I would always tell my partner, wow, these whatever Generation Z or whatever they were, I was like, wow, people get food poisoning a lot. I don't think I've ever had food poisoning in 49 years, but that's the way they would call in sick all the time. It's like, oh, I have food poisoning. I'm like, really? It's the number one excuse for like, Gen Z, X, from millennials on down, food poisoning is like the number one health concern apparently. But now that I know about this, I'll be like, you're coming in anyway and take these goddamn probiotics.
Well, there's actually some legit components to it. I'm not saying that the people are abusing it, but we're now, if you go back to Howell's work, and Dr. Howell back in the 40s had predicted, he took all these different species, everything from dogs, cats, rabbits, rats, you name it, and he fed them enzymatically deficient diets. And by 3rd generation, here's what happened. Genetic mutations started happening, lots of genetic diseases, inability to procreate, and strange social interactions, like with mothers eating their young, or all sorts of problems, and or strange sociological behaviors and changes in sexual patterns, all kinds of stuff. And he predicted that there would be a massive rise in genetic-based diseases in about 3 generations. So when we're getting to those newer generations, many of those younger people are severely compromised from their digestive health. And if you look at
now, I feel bad for you look at not believing.
Well, I just want to. We of course you wouldn't know this unless you're kind of deep down the rabbit hole of digestion, and we've seen thousands and thousands and thousands of our clients and heard their stories. And you get into people with autistic conditions or autoimmune disorders. All of those can be traced into digestion, and their food sensitivities come up really well. And as you correct them, you start to see that they have more range and capability of the diet that they can have, or the foods that they can absorb, digest, and utilize. But going into that microbiome, which is a very dynamic environment, and we've been on this kind of antibacterial kick since the advent of antibiotics and antibiotic food and antibiotic cleaners and antibiotic everything, and we've had this complete obsession. And there's a lot of benefits to that, obviously, which is part of the population exposure. We're all here because of the use of antibiotics, which saved millions and millions of lives. But the overprescription of antibiotics create resistant strains of bacteria. We get mutations in our own bacteria. We can get bacteria overgrowth. This plagues a lot of women, particularly candida issues because of disruption in the microbiome and the foods that are feeding the bad guys, and then you get a disproportionate amount of that growth. And so the strategy in order to go in and deal with that is you need to, number one, provide the foods that are going to support your microbiome, right? Number two, you need to beat down the bad guys in a way that supports the good guys. Like when you take an antibiotic, you just wipe out everything. You're nuking the place. And the problem is if someone has to go through one of those protocols, because they got an infection or something, you just do it, follow the doctor's order, get that done. But recognize when you come out, your microbiome has been significantly altered. And if you don't replace your bacteria strains, or you don't beat down the survivors, what's going to happen is you're going to be much more susceptible to a variety of illnesses and immune system problems and things like that. And you see that the people that are on the kind of the revolving door of antibiotic use are going in and they get every cold and they get every infection and they get every virus and they're continuously sick. And you can totally turn that down by getting your digestion down, because that's your body saying, stop eating. I need to recover. The food has now become a poison. Even good food is now a poison. And so the body's like, stop eating, stop this process until I correct. Or you can hack it, take all these things, reconstitute your microbiome. So that last stage, as it goes into the probiotics, the good ones, will actually convert your food into energy production units or into building blocks. So the easy way to think of it is, enzymes cut the grass and probiotics mulch it, right, and break that final stage down.
Oh, and that's cool. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
And then, here's another really important factor is that 95% of your neurotransmitters are actually built in the gut. Okay, and if you don't have the bacteria present that are essential to those, the chances of you getting depression or bipolar or all sorts of neurological conditions are quite prominent today, because people don't have the right bacteria in their body to convert and build the neurotransmitters that make them feel good or feel happy or feel supported or not feel depressed. And so oftentimes we see people, and you got a great story about that. I'll let you cue up. Tell the story about your friend,
Yeah, so my friend Frank, he's one of us. I've turned my friend. He was 75 when we became friends. He's 78, 79 now. Biohacker officially. He's got a Nano V. He's got all the toys.
Oh, cool.
He just buys anything I tell him to buy. But when started hanging out, he was on antidepressants for a very, very long time. And when he just started taking Masszymes, within weeks or months, he got off all of them and feels better. And, he just started a new business, got a dog, all kinds of incredible life changes, because his brain is getting the neurotransmitters. Because, again, as we get older, if you're not able to break the protein to amino acids and take the amino acids and build neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, and anandamide, like all of these things that make us feel good, you're going to feel depressed. So just taking, and again, Masszymes is not an antidepressant. We're not making any claims here, but for him, in his situation, it solved this problem, which was really just a lack of amino acids.
That is freaking amazing. And I think the anxiety and depression piece is just so prevalent now. So many people I talk to have that, and there's all sorts of different factors, on the metaphysical and spiritual realm also, and just having meaning in your life and support and relationships and all of that. But I don't think a lot of people have a direct correlation between digestion, neurotransmitters, and mood and sleep and all of those things. It's really interesting.
And you heard it here first. We're going to be releasing a new product in the early year called Cognibiotics. And it's all the strains that have been shown clinically to produce neurotransmitter and improve your mood. So because we all hear that there's a brain to gut connection, which obviously there is. And I want to get into another tangent related to that in a second. But there is very specific strains that produce the neurotransmitters. So that's coming out. But one thing to note too, especially for people that, want to start a new diet or change how they're eating, and, they might have food cravings. in our opinion, and there's a lot of evidence, is that the cravings are coming from very specific strains. And again, these probiotics are alive. These bacteria, they want to eat. And specific bacteria eat specific foods. So if you've been eating Doritos and McDonald's, you've been feeding certain colonies of strains. And these colonies, when they get hungry, they send messages to your brain saying, hey, go to the drive-thru, get me another Big Mac, buddy. So, that
I've
creates
heard
a
that
cycle.
call before.
But here's the good news. The good news is that we know now, within 24 to 48 hours, if you don't feed certain colonies, they start dying off. So, if you're starting a new diet, give yourself a week and, expect some cravings. I remember when, Wade turned me on to the big ass salad. I think within about a week, I remember starting to crave the big ass salad. We were both trainers in World's Gym in Vancouver, and we'd cross the street and go to like a Whole Foods and just, eat a big salad. And I remember being really surprised because I was going to McDonald's and eating keto, and then Wade turned me on to the salads, and just started craving salads, which didn't make any sense to me at the time because I didn't understand how this works. So, the gut to brain connection is a really fascinating thing.
When I first, it's been maybe 3 months or so, I've done 10-pass ozone treatments and gone to clinics and had ozone, but I got my own generator and started doing the rectal, I think it's called insulfation, something like that. Anyway, you put ozone up your butt. Apparently I like to put things up my butt. Enzymes, ozone, etc. But
we got another thing to put up your butt in a second.
Great. I hope it's not one of you two guys.
No.
Whoa, easy here. Slow down. The kids listen to the show.
That's a bit outside.
But no, in all seriousness, it was so fascinating when I started doing, I did at least once a day, sometimes twice a day, 2 minutes of a really high gamma ozone, probably higher than you're even supposed to. And within a week, I just didn't crave sugar at all. It was so interesting. I must have been knocking back the fungus or bacteria, bacteria in there that really craves the sugar. And I was like, oh my God, this is, for someone with a sweet tooth, I found the cure. Put a catheter and some ozone up your poop chute and you're done with sugar. It's just amazing. In fact, since I started doing that, I kind of have to think about mentally I think I want something sweet, but then I'm able to actually think it through and make oftentimes a wiser decision because my body's just not give me sugar. It's really weird.
Yeah. Well, speaking of wazoos and probiotics, one of the protocols that we're big fans of is taking the P3OM, which is a single strain. It's a patented strain that is like a Navy SEAL that will clean house. That's the one that's in defeat against food poisoning. And you can ferment it to make it stronger. So you can put it in a coconut water and let it ferment for maybe 4, 5, 6 hours and then do an enema with it. And it'll go and eliminate bad bacteria that might be hanging around there.
Oh,
so that's another power move.
I've done that with probiotics before too. The idea there, guys, by the way, I learned this from Stevie Nicks of Fleetwood Mac because back in the 70s, their noses got so melted from snorting so much Coke that they started blowing Coke up each other's butts. That's how I found out that you have mucous membrane inside your colon and it's permeable. And if you want to get something in your bloodstream, you take it that way. So that's the whole theory behind this. It's not like a weird kink. But with the with putting probiotics up there, that's interesting. I didn't realize that was a way to knock back the bad bacteria. So I tried, and maybe I got it wrong. I took some of your probiotics and put it in some coconut water, because there's sugar in there to feed the probiotics, and I couldn't get it to ferment. At least it didn't become sour. It was still sweet. Did I still do it right?
Wait, maybe share some of the more recent.
I was trying to make my own kind of coconut kefir, essentially.
So there's a couple things that you need to do in order to create. We've actually got a video. You can kind of go to our site and we actually train it. So
cool.
Temperature is going to be a big factor.
So it's huge.
It's a huge factor. So oftentimes I'll actually submerge the concoction that I make. So I mix coconut water or coconut meat with coconut water, and if you can get Thai coconuts, that's kind of the best, and you kind of blend it all together. If you want to accelerate the process, add a bit of honey, and that the sugars will metabolize much faster, and then what will happen is you'll get that fermentation faster. And then you can take that, if you're not in a warm climate, what you do is you put it in a mason jar, maybe a quarter to a third full. You can go up to a half, depending on how long you want to ferment that mix. Dump all the probiotics in there. The more probiotics you start with the mixture, the faster it's going to ferment. So a lot of people only put a couple in there. I'm like, just...
So how many capsules? Like 10, 20?
I think you do better on 10. Okay. You know, if you want to do 20, you want to ferment it faster, it's just going to give you a starting base much faster. And the honey will accelerate that if you do. And we've got a little video that shows you how to make it up properly and blend it. And then you can, if you want to accelerate it again, you can put it into low temperature, like maybe someplace that could heat, so a dehydrator would work. Or you could put it in, I've done it with a cooler. And I fill it with boiling hot water, and then I submerge the mason jar in the heat. Because, you know, again, every degree you go up, you're doubling activity. So the difference between something at 70 and something at body temperature is a factor of 30x.
Wow.
And so a lot of people don't, like, you know, that's exponential. It's doubling each time, 30 times. So when you look at the growth of that bacteria, it's night and day. And I think a lot of people that run into fermentation problems is because of not enough probiotics to start, not enough temperature, and then adding a little sugar.
Yeah, maybe not enough sugars.
Yeah, and you can do that because you're going to vary a lot with coconut water and coconut meat of how much you have. And so those are the things.
Well, when I did it, I didn't have the coconut meat in there, A. B, it was just as warm as it is in my house, which this is only maybe a month ago or something, so it wasn't that warm. But maybe that was why. But if you've done it right, will it not be sweet anymore? Will it have that sort of sour effervescence?
It'll start to go sour. And if you continue the experiment, it eventually will get beyond sour, and that's when it's not good. So you ferment it up at kind of a nice, like a kefir powder or like cream. Once it's fermented, you kind of taste it, and when you get that sour flavor, which is really what any yogurt should be, it should be kind of sour. They add sugar and berries and stuff to make it sweet, but then you take it, put it in the fridge at that point because you want to slow down that growth, or you want to as you bring the temperature back down, that means that you're not going to get excessive fermentation where it goes rancid.
Got it.
And then you just, what I do for a lot of people, and I think especially if they're dealing with things like candida and stuff like that, you can put it also topographically, right? You just put it right in the vaginal canal and then topographically or on the genital area. And then you can also, I just eat it by the spoonfuls, you know, and then you're getting a lot more to start than if you were just doing capsules. It's another way you can extend getting more value out of the caps that you have.
Dude, and high value.
And the best colonic I've ever done was the fermentation and putting that in the vat and running that through. And then the next day I had some impacted fecal matter that came out that I've never seen before. So.
Oh, trippy. And that was jarred loose perhaps by the
it was breaking it down.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because, again, impacted fecal matter is going to be primarily undigested protein. So, and sometimes people will feel that when you start taking mastozymes or P3OM, there's a lot of new stuff happening because it's breaking down old things that are impacted in the intestinal tract.
Back to the heartburn piece, it seems counterintuitive then that if you go through Western medicine, that they're going to prescribe something that stops the production of acid, if that's what the problem is, right? Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if we got to like the solution, but essentially we want to be adding more acid. So if someone's suffering from regular heartburn, I think this is what's helped mine, is supplementing with HCl, with hydrochloric acid, especially with big, like, steak, big heavy meals or lots of fat. And it's counterintuitive using the natural approach because you'd think, oh, if I'm taking acid, then it's going to downregulate my own production and I'm going to become dependent on it. But it seems to me it was like a couple of years there, I'm supplementing on a regular basis with HCl, and then I've really stopped getting heartburn for the most part, and then I would actually kind of forget to take HCl. Like I have your guys's, and I just forget because I don't get heartburn anymore.
A few key pieces in regard to that. So a simple test for your listeners to do is take a quarter teaspoon of baking soda, mix it in 4 ounces of water, and drink it. If you don't burp within 5 minutes, you're not producing enough hydrochloric acid.
Wait, what? Say that again.
Yeah, quarter.
Because that's what I do when I get heartburn. I take baking soda.
Yeah, a quarter teaspoon of baking soda, 4 ounces of water, stir it all up, and drink it. And if you don't burp within 5 minutes, you have low HCl.
Wow.
That's a great, easy, simple test for people to test. Now, if you look at the literature...
On an empty stomach, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay.
And if you look at the literature, the medical literature on proton pumps and these antacid things, is the recommended timeline for prescriptions is 4 to 6 weeks, because they understand that there's going to be complications. And unfortunately, what happens is the doctor, and if you go to the New England Journal of Medicine, it says, we do not cure diseases, we treat the symptoms of disease. So when Ma and Pa America walk in the door to the doctor, he's not telling them what he needs to eat. He's not trained in that area. He's not expecting them that they're going to change their lifestyle. His job is to first do no harm and to treat those symptoms, whatever they might be, whether that requires a pharmaceutical medication, whether that's a treatment, or whether that's radiation or surgery, whatever and then they take down the particular pathways. And part of the fundamental problem with people in North America is that we think that's the doctor's job to keep you healthy. The doctor's job is to keep you alive in that moment and keep you upright and functional, and will use an array. What I would say, they're very smart people with 3 basic tools, and they
what
have
are those tools? Drug, surgery.
Yeah, they got to do drug, surgery, or some sort
or
of
death,
or some other form of
the mortuary.
Maybe a treatment like radiation or chemotherapy.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Or some sort of protocol that's developed relative to the condition that people are dealing with.
Okay.
And so for us as health people, we have to, or people who want to have optimal health or live their high self, they have to recognize it's really good in those short-term situations. But as soon as you get that treatment, that's where you need to get your ND, your nutritionist, your health expert to give you the specific advice to how do you, number one, you got there because of your lifestyle. And just because you took care of the symptoms, if you keep doing the same thing, the problem's not going to get better. It's not going to go away. And so that's something to make a note of.
On the heartburn tip, another thing that I found useful was I was diagnosed with something called a hiatal hernia. You guys familiar with that?
Yes. Yeah, that can also create a problem for people as well.
Where do you know how to explain it probably better than I do? I know how I fixed it, but I'm curious if you can kind of explain. It's a mechanical sort of error in the system there, as far as I understand it.
Yeah, it's basically you start getting a hole develop and the intestine starts to push up in areas it's not supposed to go, and sometimes it'll come into your leg, or sometimes it'll go up into the lung chamber and stuff, and that can cause problems when you're with the peristaltic contraction in your stomach that will push acid up because of the pressure pushing up. So instead of a gas type of situation where you're flipping the flat over, you're literally as the food goes in, it starts pushing up an acid, and it can create ulcer conditions, gastritis conditions, or it can create heartburn and acid reflux, depending where it's coming and how it's pushing.
It's basically like your internal organs up here, under your rib cage.
Yeah.
They're not in the right place.
Correct.
Like shit gets shoved around, and it causes these different gastric juices and stuff to go where they're not supposed to go, basically.
Correct. And oftentimes one of the triggers for that is accidents. Car accidents oftentimes will jar people's internal organs and will trigger a hernia, and people don't know. They're not feeling right 6 months later. They're having digestive problems, and it's because they jarred it and actually activated the potential of a hernia situation. So,
well, for those listening that can't solve your heartburn through diet and taking HCl and stuff, what was recommended to me by, I forget what kind of practitioner it was that told me about. He was like, maybe a body work or something. He's like feeling under my ribs. He's like, dude, your stomach's not where it's supposed to be. Do you ever have heartburn? I was like, yes, help me. So he instructed me to, right when I wake up, have a huge glass of water, drink it quickly, and then stomp on my heels like 10 times in a row, and the weight of that water like in the sack of your stomach
that's a good way.
knocks it back down into place, and I'll be damned, it worked.
Nice.
Yeah, it's crazy. One of the most...
And there's a hack there too with different things, which you brought up. I mean, sometimes you want to bypass your stomach, and drinking a massive amount of fluids is one of the hacks, because it'll just, the weight of it will just flow right through. We have a leaky gut solution coming out, and that's one of those things. You want it in your intestinal tract, so you just want to kind of chug the whole thing so that it goes into the intestinal tract and not hangs around the stomach very much.
Oh, cool. One thing I did want to talk about leaky gut. I knew these topics were going to be huge, and we needed 4 hours, but we're going to do what we can here. In terms of the gluten issue, I did a show a while back for those listeners. I don't remember the number, but it's Dr. William Davis, and he's one of the foremost experts on gluten and the issues with that. And I freaking love bread, dude. Like sourdough baguette.
Yeah, we enjoyed some last night.
And salted butter, like that. That's my
It's got a little honey. We had it with a little honey.
Oh, yeah, of course. And just, and really great olive oil. I'm just...
And for the record, his mom makes some of the best bread I've ever had.
Really?
Yeah, she's undefeated on getting people onto bread. So it's steep.
Well, I'm very disappointed that when I do eat gluten, especially if it's not organic, which, you go to even like an organic restaurant, it's like, is all the flour they're using really organic? It's debatable. But what I have found is you guys have this enzyme called Gluten Guardian.
Mm-hmm.
And if I ever do just feel it in my heart to have a cheat on the bread or the pizza or whatever, I find that if I take more than you recommend, I forget how many you say to take, but I'll just take like a handful of those things, 10 or something like that. And it could be psychosomatic or your shit works, but it bothers me, if at all, way less than it would. Now, it's not going to do anything for the glyphosate that could be present in the wheat as it is in much wheat, but it's definitely working on the gluten piece.
Well, going back to my 6,000 calorie Sundays, the Gluten Guardian and the HCL are my go-tos on those days. And adding the HCL really, there's synergy. Again, there's always synergy when you combine the right things. And combining the HCL with the Gluten Guardian for me, it gives me pretty close to zero digestive distress, despite eating literally 3 times more than I normally do and not eating clean food. Like I'll eat burgers and pizza on those days.
Damn.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that. And then, I did a show on probiotics before and uncovered a product called Just Thrive, which is one of my sponsors. I love them. It really helped my gut a lot because it's a spore-based probiotic. So the theory there is that it doesn't, it hatches in your GI tract and so has a much easier time kind of digging in and fortifying you with that, whereas many of the probiotics on the market don't actually survive the digestive process, and you're basically just, you're wasting your money. As you said, the most expensive supplement is the one that doesn't work. If you could kind of summarize in a brief way, again, for people that maybe didn't hear that episode, what's the deal with like the whole, seems like there's a lot of scams and misinformation in the probiotic department at the health food store. It's like they're really expensive. Some are in the refrigerator. I've taken some. I don't think they do anything at all, and they're, could spend quite a bit of money on them.
Yeah, so there's a few things you want to look at when you're buying probiotics. One is if they're freeze-dried, okay, you pull out all the water, they become dormant. And as soon as the water, the hydration hits them again, they spring back to life. Again, certain strains are extremely resilient. So freeze-drying is one thing that you don't need to worry, be as paranoid about the refrigeration process. That if they don't freeze dry them, then you need to look at the refrigeration process, and some of the more expensive ones are in that section. And then of course, if there's any part of the transportation chain that maybe got too warm, then they might be dead. So those are certain things to look at. The other big question too is can it survive the stomach acid? And Wade, why don't you talk about P3OM and how it's designed?
Yeah, the beauty of P3OM is so. I think it's really important to understand that Matt's a keto guy, I'm a plant-based guy, and we understood there's a wide variance. We're at the two extremes, and most
you guys haven't killed each other?
Yeah,
no fisticuffs?
Well, the thing is because we're dietary agnostic. We're about what's optimal. And for him, that's a diet that works really well for me. For him, not something I've experimented with. It didn't work for me. I went on plant-based, and he's done a plant-based, and he prefers the keto in his life. But what we're totally clear on is about getting your digestive health optimized. And when it comes down to bacteria, there's 2 basic types that people are dealing with. Implant strains or colonizing strains sometimes, which will develop a colony and grow inside the intestinal tract.
Is that what I'm doing with the spore-based one?
That's what you are working on in a spore-based.
And are you a fan of that in general?
I believe my personal opinion on that is it should be done under the guidance of a naturopathic doctor, where you're actually looking at the specific strains you want and that you're going to have a diet that is going to support those strains. So if you look at, say, Matt's microbiome versus mine, we'd have completely different microbiomes because he's been doing keto for over 20 years. I've been doing plant-based for 20 years. We have completely different diets. We wanted to cultivate and develop a probiotic that was able to be universally applicable regardless of the diet. And that's why we chose a transient strain. And a transient strain comes in, does its work, and leaves. Goes through the entire body. The next thing we looked at is we looked at what's happening in hospitals today. Hospital today is one of the most dangerous places that you can go to. In fact, a friend of mine who's a surgeon, he put the first stent in the body, and he said it's so amazing how much surgery has come from when he started to now. And what they put a little incision now this big. They used to have to open you from one side of your body to the other. And he said, but the ironic thing is half the people that die from surgery today die because of infection. And they die because of infection because bacteria in hospitals, these antibiotic-resistant strain bacteria cultures, which have been subjected to massive amounts of antibiotics, a certain amount of those will mutate, and then the antibiotics don't work on them. And that's what's proliferating in hospitals, and it's very dangerous. However, if you take that same principle and you apply an environmental stress to a robust and aggressive strain, we took L. plantarum, put it through an extraordinary process that literally created a super probiotic. Just like you take a military soldier, put him in Navy SEALs, BUDS training, and he comes out as a super soldier. We did the exact same thing with that product, and that's why it's P3M. And because of that, you had to prove the process. And in the patent, there's a patent issued on that probiotic, and that means this is not me making a claim. This is what the patent demonstrated. Antiviral, antiretroviral, proteolytic, digest tumor, and is maintainable in the gastrointestinal tract. And so the role of that probiotic is to go in there, wipe out the bad guys, eat up the undigested protein that's feeding the bad guys that produce indole, skadol, and all the neurotransmitter interruptions and make people feel groggy. You've got brain fog in the morning or crust in your eyes or bad breath every morning. That's not you producing it. That's the bacteria producing it. And you got to beat those guys down and wipe it out. And if you're going to do that, you want to send the most aggressive strain that you possibly can to go in and wipe that out. And that's what L. plantarum does. And then ideally, you're going to choose the probiotics that's right for your diet and have the prebiotics and postbiotics. And that's the big gap where a lot of probiotic companies, they take a single strain research and they say, well, one strain's good, but they'll have 8 strains which are competitive. They might not work. You might not have a diet that's going to allow them to grow and support and colonize inside your body. There's all these different factors that aren't well thought out because many supplement companies are built primarily on profits or catching waves or trends that they want to profit from. They put a mishmash of maybes in the bottle. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but the trend's there and people are buying it and they turn and burn people. We've been doing this for 15 years. We've been in this long time because Matt and I are just really passionate about getting our health. We started as personal trainers, and that's why we had this probiotic in specific and why we're so excited about it. And, it's literally taking us, and we've been in the probiotic conversation a long time, it's taken us 15 years to get comfortable with coming out with our next probiotic to come down to get the right components of prebiotics, postbiotics, the Chinese herbs that are going to support that and accelerate the effect of that and the strain specific to that. And so it took us literally 15 years to get to the point where we were comfortable producing a different type of probiotic.
And what about this, and I think I covered this in my episode with Tina Anderson, but I forget what she said, but I really like being a myth buster, and I don't like when companies rip people off. It really bothers me. And I know so many people that want to get healthy or having health issues, they go in a store like Erewhon and drop $800 on a bunch of bullshit.
You can do that at the Shake Bar.
Yeah. And probiotics, in addition,
love Erewhon, by the way. I love that store.
I do too.
It's my favorite store in the
I'm
planet.
grateful to spend my money there.
Love it.
Way too much. But, you have, as you said, the different strains. So some probiotics, they're like, we have 15 strains. And people think, 15 is better than 1, not necessarily so.
Correct.
And then what about how many, CFUs, I think is how they're measured, so they're like 15 billion live guaranteed, Does any of that gobbledygook mean anything?
I'll jump in. So one is, what's more important than the count is the doubling rate. So P3M, depending on the temperature, doubles every 20 minutes. So if you do the math, again, would you rather get $1 million or have a penny double every day for 30 days? If you do the math, you'd be much richer with a penny. So that's a more important metric to look at, is like how fast is it doubling, and if you do the math.
And are they going to put that on the label though? I've never seen that. Okay.
No, but we know P3M doubles very aggressively. And as I said, that's one thing to consider. But here's the unfiltered truth about probiotics from a guy that formulates things with probiotics. In my opinion, like at this very moment, we know maybe 1% of what we'll know in maybe 10 years, right? So it's such a complex system. There's so many strains. There's competitive strains. There's strains that will beat other strains. Each strain has certain things, and we do have some data, so we're not completely ignorant. But and of course, I read research all the time, and we're discovering new stuff like on a daily basis, literally, as far as what's coming out as far as research. But there's there's probably a lot of myths. There's probably a lot of stuff that we believe today. And, that's why these podcasts are so important, and just constantly educating yourself. I mean, it's just one of the things about health. There's always new information coming out that makes yesterday's information obsolete. So I think when it comes to probiotics in general, that's one of the things to look for. One other comment to talk about as far as probiotics is there are certain strains that produce histamine. So those are things that you want to look at, and you can Google probiotics histamine, and you'll see there's strains that do that. So that's one, and that'll produce brain fog. So again, going back to Naveen, Wade and I were chatting with Naveen as we were walking at a health event last year, and he said that almost nothing colonizes. You're talking about a guy who built a gut health testing company, and he's not seeing, and I've looked at a lot of different biome tests, including my own, and almost nothing colonizes as far as what's commercially available. And I saw another study that came out of Europe. They tested 55 different probiotic products, and nothing seems to colonize. Now, does that mean there's no benefits as you're taking them? I think there's benefits as it's going through your intestinal tract. So if you look at it as a digestive aid, I think it has merit. But I think one of the biggest myths is that I'm going to take these strains and they're going to colonize, and then I'm going to be healthier as a result. They don't seem to colonize. We know P3M is transient. That's how it was designed. But I think in general, almost nothing seems to colonize. So that's probably one of the biggest myths.
Interesting. And then what about...
But maybe maybe the spores do. Again,
that's their big selling point. And there was a scientist, a friend of mine, I forget his name, a friend of mine interviewed on his podcast that actually came up with this particular strain of the spores. So when I interviewed Tina Anderson from Just Thrive, it wasn't, we didn't get that deeply scientific because that wasn't her expertise. We talked about fermented foods and all kinds of different things like that. But from what I understand, that one does, and they have, it's been quantified and tested in a lab. But I'm also someone, it's like, cool, if that one's good and y'all's is good, I'm just going to take them all.
Well, here's a question.
I'm going to hedge my bets.
Sometimes we overcomplicate things. I always say, did you take it and did you feel the benefit?
Totally, that's it.
That's the deciding factor. And I think what's really odd about humans today is that somehow we've lost connection with our own bodies and our own biofeedback. Keep in mind, our bodies are the process of billions of years of evolution. And there are literally millions of reactions going on at any given moment that are just happening automatically. Even a person dying has millions of functions still working at a perfect rate. And because we've become so externalized in our life, we forgot to tune in. And one of the beautiful things that happened to me in my life is my old coach, Scott Abel, in bodybuilding, taught me specifically how to leverage biofeedback. In other words, because I had a training routine, because I had a dietary, he'd say, how do you feel? What's your hunger levels? What's your moods? How are you going to the bathroom? Are you waking up tired in the morning? And I would start to build patterns. Now, what I've done with that, and I recommend this for your listeners, is follow the protocol and start writing down whatever program you're on. Write the program, and if you're taking a new product, write how you're feeling on a day-to-day basis and see the changes. And then if you get testing, this is where it becomes magic. You start testing in correlation with your biofeedback. And pretty soon, from your biofeedback, you can predict what the testing is going to be. And so that way you can get real-time feedback of where you are relative to a variety of different tests. And one of the things I love taking new tests for is because now I can do that test and monitor my biofeedback and go, oh yeah, I'm starting to see this. And then, 3 years down the road, I can remember what that was. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm off here. And I remember I took that back 3 years ago to correct myself, and boom, you can fix that. And so I really encourage people to cultivate that mindfulness practice. Take the time, check in with your body, and write it down. And when we coach people, I get a person to write down their whole lifestyle for 2 weeks. And everybody says they eat pretty good, and then they go through it, and they're like, oh, it wasn't so good. And they start seeing their moods or their sleep patterns and stuff, and it's like, look, there it is. It's self-evident.
Yeah.
And we can correct those patterns relatively easily with lifestyle change.
I'm also a huge fan of lab tests, working with a functional medicine doc, and it's fun to see yourself age backwards. I can look at my labs from 15 years ago, and they look like shit. And every year over year, all the different metrics of testing, and the testing gets more sophisticated over time too, right?
Correct.
And you have more, options available to the different types of tests you can do, but it's so fun to see. Speaking of which, and we're just about out of time here, if we can do this in just a couple seconds, but when I recently worked with my doctor, Dr. Scott Scher, who was recently a guest on the show talking about hyperbaric oxygen therapy, we did my biome test and came up with decreased pancreatic elastase, so pancreatic enzymatic production deficiency, and he wants me to take pancreatic enzymes with meals. Does that make sense to you guys?
Well, let's talk a little bit about humans.
Okay. I'd be like, we have 30 seconds to answer a question that
humans
takes an hour.
have a pancreas that's 4 times larger per body weight than any other species, larger because we have a highly cooked food diet and we have to produce more enzymes. So that's your enzyme storage system. Your liver produces most of it and stores it and releases it. And if you're not releasing enough enzymes from your pancreas, oftentimes taking some form of digestive health aid is going to benefit. So I would certainly say the test is probably correct, although I wouldn't list it to pancreatic enzymes per se, because pancreatic enzymes are generally from an animal-based source, and they're only usually effective within a very narrow range of pH. And that's where I think for most people, if they go to a cultured enzyme, and we talked about those enzyme ratios, a cultured enzyme is going to be 100 times to 1,000 times more powerful, and chances are they're going to get a much better result with less caps.
So you think from y'all's enzymes that I'm taking, the mass enzymes that I wasn't taking as regularly when I did this, that I could solve that?
Oh, absolutely.
Dope. Okay.
There was another issue that I saw, which was fatty stools, and that's a lipase deficiency.
I had that challenge.
That sounds really gross. Yeah, I was disappointed when he had to explain that to me.
Yeah, I had that problem when I tried a ketogenic diet. I would find when I hit a certain amount of fat in the body, I would get oil in my stools until Matty G concocted the Capex formulation.
Oh, nice.
So Capex has 4 different types of lipase. So if you're in a keto diet or you have your situation, it solves that. But Capex is a little more than just a digestive aid. It's an incredible mitochondrial booster because, what it does, it'll break the fat into fatty acids. The L-carnitine transports it into the mitochondria, in the muscles, and in the liver. And then there's several ingredients, CoQ10, 7-keto-DHEA, which activates three liver enzymes, and Inoslim, which activates even the enzymes in the mitochondria even more. So you're getting the mitochondria kind of going from a V4 to a V12, and you're feeding them more, so you're giving them more fuel, and you're boosting the motor, the horsepower, if you will. So, if you take 4 or 5 caps, 3 caps in the morning, you'll get 8 to 12 hours of energy without tapping your adrenals, which is awesome.
I love that K-Pex stuff, dude. I don't even count, but I just, every morning with my first drink of water, just take a big handful of them. And I'm just like, I don't know. Yeah. If it says 3, like 10 must be better. You know, kind of,
we're in the
okay,
same
good. And then, but that's something that we'd also want to be taking in my case where I'm in a high-fat diet and my body doesn't digest fat easily.
Yeah, it's probably 1 or 2 caps because it's really potent in terms of the dosage of the lipase.
Okay. And then the last thing I want to cover, and then we're going to do a quick lightning question to close out here, is I've got this Klebsiella overgrowth, which is, can happen from antibiotic use and IBS and, all this kind of stuff, which is a real bummer. And I think that might be at the root of some of the digestive problems that I've been plagued by for a while. And so my doc's got me on the, the oregano oil, and I'm taking I think I'm not on his recommendation when I'm taking this stuff that's like a pine oil, which is super hardcore, kind of like turpentine therapy, similar to that kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, I'm done. I can't have this shit, no pun intended, happening. So any advice on bacterial overgrowth like that?
Well, I think these are effective tools. Another thing to look at is starving it. So again, there's something that you're feeding it. There's something that you're eating that's feeding that strain. So remember what I said earlier, 24 to 48 hours, strains start dying. So figuring out what is eating that might be difficult. This is where maybe muscle testing would be very helpful. Going through a practitioner that you would trust as accurate, and kind of having a list of foods and testing and really isolating which food is feeding that and then eliminating that from your diet for a while. That'd be my approach.
And another option that you may want to consider is subjecting yourself to a panchakarma, which is an Ayurvedic philosophy, which is designed to, you pump all these oils into the fats that push out the toxins, and then out come the medicated herbs, which are going to cause sometimes vomiting and sometimes, you spend a lot of time on the throne. But the effectiveness of that for people who have dysbiosis inside their bacteria cultures is pretty strong. It's, usually you're going to need 3-4 weeks, and not everybody can do that. Just to take that, and because it's not something that when you're going through that process that you can go out and, do your day job. It's not going to work that way. So it's a very intensive program for people really struggling.
Cool. Yeah. Someone was just recommending that to me a couple of days ago in an interview. Sahara Rose, a Ayurvedic expert. Mm-hmm. My last question is, what are you guys coming up with for leaky gut?
We have actually 2 formulas. One is vegan and one is non-vegan. So it's coming out in the new year. Really excited about it. And basically it seals the gut. So it's several different ingredients that have been shown to be able to seal and fix that. So stay tuned.
Oh, dope. Because this is going to come out in the new year, maybe even as far out as February or March. Cool. So maybe by that time
we'll probably have it.
Be rocking and rolling. All right, cool. Normally this is where I ask who have been 3 teachers or teachings that have influenced you, but I'm running super late for an event that I'm supposed to be at, and it's a habit that I'm working on breaking.
Maybe we can just do one.
Yeah, give me one. So each of you give me one teacher that's profoundly influenced your life in general that our listeners
we'll
might be
pick
able to
the one that
study.
We all did.
Yeah, let's do it. David Hawkins.
Nice.
Yeah. Best teacher overall for navigating life there is. Read the whole series, watch all the videos, do all that sort of stuff. I haven't seen anybody that's done that their life hasn't radically transformed and their perception of the challenges they might be going through.
What a perfect ending, and it's funny because if I ever meet anyone that's not just like, oh yeah, I read his book or something, but if someone's like into David Hawkins' work, David R. Hawkins for our show notes writers, I already know they're at a certain level of consciousness because no one else would ever be interested in his work unless they were at a certain kind of vibe. Mm-hmm. So exactly. I always find if I meet someone and we have that in common, I'm like, we totally understand each other on a soul level from that standpoint. So thank you so much for that.
Absolutely.
That's a great way to end it. Lastly, where can we find you guys? Website, social media, where can people go buy your stuff and do all the social media things?
Well, no, we have a special link with a discount. So
I don't have it on hand, but I'll give that to your web. We've got a discount you guys gave us, which I don't have in my notes, but I'll put in the intro and the outro for people. Mm-hmm. What about for people that want to follow you on social? Do you have anything going on?
Just Google BiOptimizers. We have a YouTube channel that we're starting to put up more videos. We had produced 84 videos that is a really valuable series. We are on Instagram, we're on Facebook, so people can just
Awesome.
BiOptimizers.
Dope. I'm going to go watch the video on getting my kefir game down. But I won't watch the video where you do the rectal implant. What? Okay. That wraps us up, guys. Thanks for joining me today.
Great to be here.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.